Any fool can know. The point is to understand. Time travel is that one subject where even if you don't necessarily understand it, you still can't help but to be fascinated by it. It's in literally every form of media, from short films, movies. Every major film company in the last decade has released a movie where the primary focus is time travel, Avengers Endgame and Terminator being one of the main few subjects. What I'm proposing is a 2 to 3 minute documentary where the primary focus will be rotating around how time travel actually works, since that's never really discussed in the movies. I mean, they have their own forms of time travel and how time flows, but overall it's not very scientifically accurate. So in this 2 to 3 minute documentary, I will be exploring the recent discovery of paradox-free time travel, where I'll be working as both the editor and producer of the short. I also want to take a quick look into sound and the way that works inside documentaries, since music and sound design is a massive motivator in what people will believe. And even though I'm trying to make as unbiased a documentary as possible, it would be a little bit easier if the audience were to simply agree with me. But enough of that, my main focus is editing. This documentary is entirely based on the theory of paradox-free time travel, whose main purpose is not to drag you away from what you believe in, but to just educate you on what is possibly the most advanced leap in theoretical physics since string theory. This is only a theory, and even if you disagree with it, you're still going to enjoy the documentary as a whole, because paradox-free time travel is not the only thing I discuss in it. It divulges into time travel, closed time-like curves, wormholes, light cones, literally anything you could imagine. It's just interesting. It's interesting. All of that in one documentary, which is just appealing to the general audience. This documentary will be primarily explained through animation, all presented by a digital character, which I have not designed yet, but it might just be a digital version of me, explaining advanced physics in a way that's understandable by people who have never had any interest in space whatsoever, which is exactly the reason it's in this style of animation. During my market research, I found that this kind of animation paired with animated graphs actually helps to connote my point with a lot more ease, explaining the theory in a way that's still scientific, but also not too advanced where nobody understands what I'm saying whatsoever. The working title for this documentary is Paradox-Free Time Travel, the Grandfather Paradox Resolved or Disproven. Told in a reflective mode of documentary that isn't too biased, but at least makes you question your own opinion. The target audience for this piece honestly isn't too small either. For C, I'm aiming around middle class because upper class are less likely to care about something that's so complex. They simply just won't have the time to try and learn about something like this. And lower class people are less likely to have the opportunities to actually watch the documentary. For age, I'm aiming somewhere between 15 to 22, simply because younger people are more likely to care than older people. Middle class might still care, but with the same situation as upper class, I doubt they'll really have enough time to actually worry about learning something like this. For gender, it doesn't really matter either. Males are just as likely to like theoretical physics as females, according to some research I did. For E, it doesn't really matter either. It'd probably be more attractive to Western cultures. Those who have more money would have more opportunities and therefore would have a higher chance of seeing this documentary. But if Eastern cultures as well have those same opportunities, although less likely, then they could still look at them. I was apparently wrong, there was one more. But for I am looking for anyone interested, of course, in any kind of physics, science. Anyone that has an interest for stuff they don't understand would obviously be my target audience for this kind of documentary. This documentary was of course inspired by Germain Tobar, Fabio Costa and Albert Einstein, the first two scientists being the people who actually wrote the paper in the first place, which without I wouldn't even have a documentary. And Albert Einstein of course being the man who discovered the theory on general relativity, of which kickstarted the boom in time travel, which made it so popular in movies, and of course a theory as a whole all over the world. My main animation inspirations was primarily it's Alex Clark and Jaden Animations, and although their style of animation isn't strictly the same as mine, I got the idea from them about how to portray a story through animation, so that's where I got that idea from. This documentary will start off with a quick 10-second montage trailer of 2020 What a Year, and then start into the animation directly afterwards. The first subject which I want to look into being wormholes, which I plan to cover in roughly about 30 seconds, where during this stage in the entire project I plan to use primarily ethos to get my points across. As with this project being an education style documentary, I also need to talk about facts, so I'll be using logos as well, but since this is only a theory, I need to primarily focus on getting them to trust me first, which is why I'm looking around ethos. After wormholes, I'm then going to spend some time explaining light cones, which will take me around 50 seconds, and then the remaining minute and a half I will be going through the theory and closed time-like curves with the examples from the paper. Obviously, as I'm talking through each subject, animating the appropriate artwork or graphs to make it more intriguing or make more sense. What gives me a unique competitive advantage over others is simply the fact that I am doing an animation. Most science documentaries that I've looked into, such as time travel, just any science, physics related subject, never actually uses animation. There's usually something like stock footage or light animation, such as just keyframing a planet moving across the screen, but I've never seen something that's going to be like mine is, which is what makes my one so unique. When you do something like that, they pretty much exclude an entire audience base. Anybody that doesn't have at least an intermediate understanding of physics is not going to understand what they're talking about at all. Whereas with my one, with the way I explain it and the animations and the graphs that I use, it's going to be a lot easier to understand, so even people with the most basic understanding of science is going to understand what I'm going on about. It's also just in general moving pictures, just an animation, so if you like moving pictures, you don't even have to like science, you could just watch the animation and you'll enjoy the documentary. Of which you can see right here in the interviews I conducted for people who don't necessarily follow science but have a basic understanding of it. Would you watch a documentary on paradox-free time travel?
Yes, it seems very interesting.
I would, because I have no idea how that's possible, so I'd be curious to know.
Have you ever watched a physics documentary before?
Yeah, but they weren't interesting, like Space Paradox.
I've seen moments. My granddad watches a lot, and I've caught moments.
Closed time-like curves are essentially what makes it possible to loop back on itself. So imagine traveling, everybody is traveling forward in time currently. We're traveling on something that is called a world line. And a closed time-like curve essentially allows you to continue traveling on that world line, but taking in a loop so that you end up going backwards in time instead of the traditional forwards.
I've got one.
No, yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Like, I don't see how someone can understand that.
Huh? What?